Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the Cold Fusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition. It is August 6th, 2024. This is episode 217. Glad to have you with us. My name is Eric Peterson, and I'm joined today by a very still Dan Card.
How's it going? Yeah, this is not one of my favorite pictures, but I'm having camera issues, so I really can't complain.
Well, we're just glad to have you, Dan.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
We'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Order Solutions, the makers of all your favorite box products, including BoxLing. A few ways you can say thanks and give back. Come to Into the Box 2025. You can buy tickets right now. We call them our blind tickets because you're buying it without knowing who's speaking, and you just know it's going to be that good. It's April 30th to May 2nd in Washington, D.C. next year. We hope to see you there. You can also like and subscribe to all our videos on YouTube, including this podcast. Start and fork our dependencies on GitHub. Subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app of choice. Leave us a review too. We'd love to read that out here on the podcast for you. You can sign up for a free or paid account on CFcast, which releases new content regularly. Buy some awesome swag from our Box Life store or one of our great books like 102 Cool Box Quick Tips and Tricks.
Yeah, we have a lot going on. Plus, we also have our Patreon supporters. We're up to 57 different Patreon supporters, which is kind of nice. We'll read out some names a little bit later in the podcast.
That's right. Well, let's jump into some stuff here. For news and announcements, let's jump right into some updates and releases.
Okay.
So we have a whole section for BoxLing for our BoxLing lovers. We're going to start with some of the other stuff first. Sort of along the same line, CFconfig 2.0.6 is out. It has support for BoxLing servers. So you can take that same config you've been using over in Adobe and Lucy and bring it over.
Now, are there any settings that are different in BoxLing than they are? I mean, there must be. So.
We have some of our own specific ones, but all the keys in CFconfig map, we tried to make it almost the same.
Right.
So
nice. Cool. All right. Well, along with that, we have Spreadsheet CFML released for 4.1.0 and 4.2.0. A couple different positions about its sheet information. Allows data types to be specified with add column. There's a couple different updates for that. You can check that out in ForgeBox, I believe.
Yes, these are all available on ForgeBox. The Sentry module got an update to version 2. Sentry has a new event structure design, and if you're updating to their latest version, you're going to want to use the V2 module.
There you go. Also, updates to CBQ from 3.08 to 3.09. There's a sync provider update. Says there's bug fixes in that. If you haven't tried CBQ, check it out. It is actually a really amazing tool. And I'm saying that because Eric made it, and he won't say it, but I'm saying it because it actually is amazing. We're overhauling a huge site to use CBQ almost everywhere, and it is going really well.
I'll send you that money later. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. A little short this month.
All right. We have so much BoxLing news to share, and part of it is because we're about 2 months since the last time we got to talk. Only about a month since the last BoxLing town hall, though. So there's that could tide you over. But we've had 7 betas in that time. So obviously we can't tell you every single thing that was released from it. So we're going to pull out a few things. So beta 2 through 8, we got links in the show notes with all the details that you're going to want to go into. Some of the highlights I know now is we are at, I think, 99% of our built-in function completion. So matching Adobe and Lucy's. That might even be at 100% at this point, but we are right up there. We also have some really neat things like nested transactions. It's something we've wanted forever in our open source CFML engines, and you can get that now in BoxLing. Read all about that in some of these blog posts. Great query caching improvements and cache improvements in general. Some nice additions like attempts, which are ways to try to get data from inside, like if you're doing a BoxLing module development. And some that we're going to leave for our blog posts, such as a lot of stuff with stream enhancements and even modernizing some of the old built-in functions like array append and things like that. Did you have any favorites from the ones that you saw, Dan?
I didn't. I was looking at these and I kind of got a little overwhelmed with how many betas have actually been released. I started putting all the links to beta 3 and beta 4 and beta 5 and beta 6 and everything else. And I think I'm just going to jump to the end and put the one for beta 8 on there. I was laughing when you mentioned that about the transactions, because I ran into that on a site actually for a client, and we could not figure out at all why all of a sudden, like halfway down this one method, everything stopped. So that nested transactions might have been, I think I helped convince Mike to go ahead and put that in, which was, I felt that was a pretty good contribution to the whole BoxLing process, But no, I think the level of compatibility between the languages and just being able to execute things in a really good and efficient way, I think has been fantastic. I've watched obviously BoxLing develop over the past year or so. Have not been able to dive in as much as I would like. I'm still in the very shallow end of looking at it. But I'm really intrigued by the whole process. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. I think the last two I'd love to point out, run async was added, as a built-in function, but it is powered by BoxLing futures and completable futures. If you've used ColdBox's async manager, you're going to be right at home. You get all that power from the built-in run async, which is great. And then the other one that just makes me so happy as someone who's worked with a lot of different Java libraries, they love their, what do they call them? Either functional interfaces, or I think it's like SAM is the acronym, Single Abstract Method Interface. There we go. So you'll see methods where they're taking lambdas in, and if you've ever tried to pass a Cold Fusion function as a lambda, you got to jump through all sorts of hoops to make it work. But not in BoxLing. BoxLing will automatically coerce any function interface you give it to these single abstract method interfaces, these consumers, by consumers, suppliers, words that you don't really need to know again because it will automatically coerce into that. And that's just so nice from somebody who wants to use any sort of Java code. So we're just scratching the surface. There's so much in here. I know, as kind of a teaser for the future, we don't have a set date yet, but we are hard at work on some incredible performance improvements. You're going to love it. So lots of great things happening in BoxLing. There's a beta every week. Look for the release notes on Friday. So you'll see beta 9 this Friday.
There you go. And if you have any questions about any of those things, we do have our ongoing BoxLing town meetings. There's one coming up pretty soon, right?
I'm not exactly sure the date, but we have been trying that. We have a link for you for the last one here that we'd love to give you as well.
There we go. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm looking at this as a series of live, but it's a series of podcast series. It's a podcast series. I see what you're saying. Yep. BoxLing town. I'm going to let you keep talking, and I'm playing catch up a little bit here with all the links. So
no worries. The last BoxLing news we'd love to tell you on the releases front is I counted, 7 BoxLing modules released in the last 2 months as well. Things for passwords, operating system information like hardware information, a Jython module so you can run all that fun Python code right from BoxLing, mail, image, even WDDX if you're unfortunate enough to have to still use that, and a HyperSQL module. So that's just adding to the already existing modules that we had in BoxLing. So lots to keep you busy over there.
And the whole point of all these modules, because you look at these, and some of these are built into what, like, if you look at the Adobe Cold Fusion or Lucy, those stuff are built into the main core of the language, but these are broken out in order to keep that core very small, so you can add on as needed. So you're not putting a lot of bloat if you're having things where you don't need it. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Adobe and Lucy have had those approaches too. Lucy 5 has all their extensions. Adobe in, I believe it was 2021, added in their CLI and their modules. So it's an approach that all of the engines are taking, and yes, it keeps it very lightweight, and you can add the power that you need into there.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. We again, it's been a while, but for CFcast, if you attended Into the Box 2024, you should have had a invite to the series sent to you, so you can view all those videos. If you did not attend, you can purchase those as a premium series until it's released as a general series for all subscribers, most likely at the end of the year. So if you were an attendee and you don't have access yet, please reach out on the Ordis website to our support team so we can get that all set for you.
Cool.
Well, let's
All
talk
right,
about conferences and trainings.
My forte, mostly because I seem to be, I always think that even though I've taught conferences and I've spoken at conferences, I always learn a lot more. And I love this training session because I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that was the thing. Anyway, coming up on Thursday this week, August 8th, the online Cold Fusion users group with Charlie Earhart is doing a session on CF scheduled tasks. There's more than you may know. Which is basically, it says, you may think that scheduled tasks are pretty straightforward. You run a URL at a certain time and you're done. But this is going to go into a lot more detail than that. Everything from running components, CFCs, getting into schedules, getting into not just using the the CFadmin UI, but also just how do you actually put them together? How do you cluster them? How do you basically make them work for you as opposed to trying to shoehorn them in sideways? Configuration files, features for managing different tasks, and also some ways that really don't work, which I seem to find pretty well on my own. So this might be a good thing to go do. Also coming up, we have from Ordis, we have our Cold Box from Zero to Hero. It's a virtual live training. That's on the 15th and 16th of this month, August 15th and 16th. It's a 9 to 12 and 2 to 5. So they're breaking up into different, breaking up the day so you can still get a little stuff done. In the workshop, you'll be introduced to the latest version of the most popular CFML MVC framework, ColdBox 7. Master the fundamentals, dive into advanced features. We'll also go through and build a real-world app. We'll look at how to do some behavior-driven testing, or behavior-driven development, I should say, and also leverage ForgeBox modules and maybe even create your own modules. The link for that's on Eventbrite. It's also on the Ordis website, and that's coming up pretty soon. It's being taught by, who's doing that? Is that Gavin?
Or that is Gavin, yes.
Nice. He's good.
Yeah, you got about a week so to get scheduled for that as well. Again, that's 9 to noon and 2 to 5 Central Daylight Time.
Now that isn't two sessions. That actually is the same session, just broken up into two parts. I mean, it's one big class with a break in the middle, is what it is.
Yeah, over and 2 days worth.
Oh yeah, that's right. Of course, 2 days worth. Sorry.
Yeah, we're giving you a break, a nice break for lunch, or to go catch up on work if you have to still get work done during this. So we get that.
Makes sense.
Cool. All right, CF Summit in Las Vegas. We are getting closer. It is next month, the end of the month, September 30th through October 1st for the conference, October 2nd for the certification. Again, you can't really beat the price that Adobe gives you on these.
Very true.
Right now, you can get a session pass for $200, and if you'd like to come to the certification, it is $400. So you can check that out now. And if you were a previous attendee, also check your email. You probably have a coupon code for some better pricing there. And also, you can check out the speakers on their website. They've been announcing them, and I believe all of them are posted now. This is at Resorts World in Las Vegas. And before, if you want to come a little bit early, we're going to have an Ortus workshop by Luis Mahano, building a REST API for the modern developer. This is going to be the Saturday and Sunday before the conference at the Bottega Exchange there in Las Vegas. So a 2-day in-person conference with, workshop with Luis about building REST APIs using ColdBox, CommandBox, CB Security, Swagger, and more.
I like it. Also looking ahead for what even as far away as next year, we've been to the Box 2025. It's going to be in Washington, D.C. The dates are April 30th to May 2nd. Again, that's in DC. We're doing 50% off blind tickets. So basically, it's like saying, hey, I want to go. And we are rewarding your faith in us with a great discount, even though we haven't announced who's actually speaking yet. But I am pretty positive, given past performance, it's going to be a pretty amazing lineup. And you never know what's going to happen. So, and what a deal.
I mean,
50% off.
Yeah, it's $250 right now for the conference. And I mean, that's almost the same, just a little bit more than Adobe's incredibly subsidized conference ticket price. So, all right. As always, if you need more conferences in your life, comps.tech has you covered. You can go there and search across languages, locations, and find a conference that you would like to attend. Okay, we have 2 months of blog posts to get through. Looking in there, we've separated it into kind of general community. We have a BoxLing corner, which is mostly Brad, and we have a Ben Nadal corner. So let's see how which is all Ben. Let's see how we can get through these ones. I'll kick it off with one here by Robert Zender talking about parsing and formatting ISO 8601 time intervals with CF. So what he wanted to do here was take, that ISO 8601 is the format for date, time zone, and he wanted to make it human readable. And I've seen these before, so it can say something like, this was about 5 minutes ago, an hour ago, 3 days ago. And he found a nice handy function inside, I believe it was the Apache Commons library. Yep. So he creates a duration from the timestamp, and then he can have it formatted out in words. So if you have the Apache Commons time library already in, or Lang library, is it? There's so many Apache Commons stuff.
Yes.
You can go ahead and use that. I also wanted to take a time to plug Coda, which is a ForgeBox module I made for specifically this. I wrote that I think the description says either a wrapper around dates or date function helper functions, not sure which yet. I basically made a module.
This solves a problem we're kind of having a hard time defining. Just check it out, see what happens.
Well, I needed exactly what Robert was talking about. I needed to say this happened a minute ago, about 3 minutes ago, things like that. And I just wanted somewhere to put it and didn't want it to be so like single purpose. So anyways, that's Coda, but the only thing it does is this format distance kind of helper, both in English and German, thanks to, I believe it was Kai Koenig that contributed that. So if you don't want to put Apache Commons in yours, you can check out a CFML implementation.
Yes. That works. All right. Also, a blog post, which ties right into one of our trainings coming up, obviously, we just said, was today with the Ortus Solutions Unlock the Power of REST APIs with ColdBox. ColdBox provides a comprehensive framework so you can build REST APIs. And this kind of walks through how to do some of that. I'd say look at that, get a taste, and then come to the training that we're doing with CF Summit.
Awesome. Well, let's get into our BoxLing corner, and then we'll end with the Ben corner. The first, and this is just because I like bragging about our team. If you had the chance to attend CF Summit, or if you want to go watch the video, aforementioned Kai Koenig gave a talk about BoxLing versus the world, is what he called it, comparing BoxLing to different languages. And this was the quote that we pulled out. BoxLing has better tooling before its first release than any other CF platform currently has. So awesome. If you want to know more about what he meant by that, you can go check out the video, and you can check out all our docs. You can see the great tooling that we're providing, debuggers, abstract syntax tree parsing, lots of great stuff. And jump over to the
servers.
community forum to get more information too.
Jacob's been doing some amazing work on that, which is awesome.
All right, I'm going to combine these next few. So we have a lot from Brad here, and they're about leveraging some new features in BoxLing that you're not going to be able to get in Adobe Cold Fusion or Lucy. Those are Java method references. So just like in CF, where you can say, take a method and store it in a variable and then pass it around, you can now do that with Java methods, both instance and static methods. Pass those around.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You can use those method references or even just functional binding in your map and filter functions, whether it's streams or on arrays, so that you don't. Normally, it's what we do is say like, for map this item, and then it's item dot do something, and you can shorten that in many languages, including Java, to just the like dot do something, and it figures it out, and that's in BoxLing as well. And then there's one or two posts about using streams in BoxLing. If you're like, streams, why would I use streams? I have arrays. Come look at these because they're amazing. I think Brad had one example where he's like, I want to get the first Fibonacci number like over 1,000, and it's in a stream, because a stream doesn't have to be like an array of numbers or array of something. It can be infinite. It just means I produce values and I can act on those values. And so we have some really nice integration with streams. You can even collect a Java stream into a BoxLing array or struct very easily, all built-in methods as we implement the stream interface or inherit from streams. So great stuff there. I think
I project a couple of years ago was my first jump into streams, and I was absolutely blown away by what you can do with it with a relatively small amount of code. And yeah, it just kind of handles whatever you throw at it. It's kind of phenomenal.
Right. I've often wanted. I even made a library like years ago I called it CF Collection, because I wanted lots.
Collection, yep.
I wanted lots of other methods that I could call on arrays and collections and things like that. And with streams, I don't need those. It's already there.
Yeah.
So some great things, some great examples, and I think my favorite is Brad gives you the code and you can just copy and paste it into tryboxling.io, and you're doing it right there. So
awesome.
The last one from Brad that I think will have most people agreeing with this, but one of the reasons BoxLing it has two parsers, right? We talked about the BoxLing parser, we talked about a CF parser. And one of the reasons we did that is so we could make decisions like we are making here, which is we're getting rid of a bunch of built-in functions from BoxLing in favor of their member version. So think array append. That is not going to exist in BoxLing. You're going to use, the array variable dot append. You're going to favor those member methods. If you're using the compat module, you're in CF code, we'll go ahead and do all that for you. But BoxLing is only going to know I have member methods on these. In addition, the ones that return true and false, array append, I'm looking at you, don't do that anymore, because that just does not help, right? We want to chain these things so they start returning values that make sense. You're in BoxLing code, you get all this. If you're back in CF, you got the compat module in, you'll see exactly what you're used to seeing. But that's why we have this structure, so we can push the boundaries, we can get the code that we want, we can clean it up, and we can still support code as we convert it into BoxLing code.
Right. Yeah, and that's and I'm sure people listening to this already know this, but basically, if you're new to BoxLing, that transpiling process will take your Cold Fusion code and move it into BoxLing. So just because you're using the array append in your Cold Fusion code, that shouldn't be a deterrent from checking out BoxLing with that same code. It will still work. This is a programming in BoxLing.
Yeah, and when you install BoxLing, there's a couple of, it was back in one of the betas, a couple of binaries that we include that you can run on your code, and one of them is to transpile a file and output the code. right? You can do it on the fly and we'll do it on your server and you never see it. But you can also say, here's a CF file, please make it BoxLing. And so if you pointed at a file that had all these built-in functions, what you would get out is the member function version of it. So it will do all that for you, save you a whole bunch of rewriting.
That's awesome. It is phenomenal. I think what happens when you start realizing that all this, like the text, this is going to sound stupid, but you have text, which means basically nothing. But then you take that text and you basically turn it into something that means something in a programming language, and you can start moving that around to different languages because the equivalent. This is a half-formed thought that made a lot more sense in my head than it is coming out of my mouth. So I'm just going to jump forward and say we're going to go to the Ben Liddell corner.
Ooh. Oh, we do have one more in the BoxLing corner because I kind of buried it in the middle.
My apologies. Continue
as
on.
I was combining all of Brad's ones. We have a guest blog post, Daniel Mejia, effortless development, launching your BoxLing mini server.
Here he takes reading that and I jump right over it. Sorry. Yep.
No worries. Here he takes you through deploying code to GitHub using a GitHub action to trigger render.com. Everything was free in here or on the free tier. And so you can check out how to get a BoxLing project up and running super quick and super small. The mini server is so tiny. I got to go look up the size, but I mean, we're talking in the, I think, low 10s megabytes. So
yeah, it's that. That's awesome.
All right, I think now we can jump into the Ben corner.
Okay, now we can jump into the Ben corner. So some of these that we're highlighting, I really kind of resonated, and some of them I wasn't exactly sure. But he had but starting back in June, we're going way back to June because it's been a while since we've done this. One of the blog posts that Ben had to do with basically using an array with data, but using range offsets on how to power different weighted distributions in Cold Fusion. Now, I gotta be honest, this is one of those things where I read this and I was like, all right, I kind of get, but the idea of weighted distributions, my impression was it really was, how do we actually randomize numbers so that it actually mirrors what is in a data set already? Was that correct? Did you? I'm putting you on the spot here, Eric. Yeah. I'm sorry, because I read that, and this was my portion and stuff, but I read it, but it basically had to do with using, if you know where your data is in your array, and you use different range sets, you can actually, like I said, map it out to the correct power weighting. Now, I didn't understand all the concepts in it. It was well described. I understood it while I was reading it. I cannot articulate it again. So I am just going to move on to the next one. It's all right. But it was really kind of neat how using these simple processes, we can actually get into more advanced mathematical concepts and stuff. But it wasn't that hard the way that he described it, just having to do with arrays and offsets. I didn't have a personal use case for it at the moment, but it made a lot of sense. And I'm going to remember it when I come back, when I do have a use case. The next one, though, I thought was incredibly powerful, incredibly useful, because I didn't realize that Cold Fusion did this. So his blog post on June 25th, it's called Core Decision Functions Will Accept Null Undefined Values in Cold Fusion. And I read that and I was like, all right, this is where we're checking for is null and everything else. But he walks in and says, wait a minute, all these different things in Cold Fusion will actually accept nulls. And one of the biggest takeaways about this, if you've ever used JavaScript, and there is the, oh gosh, what do they call it? Basically, it was the argument where you can have it, you read a structure, and instead of just putting like, name of the structure, dot whatever, so all the dot notation, Cold Fusion will actually both, I think both ACF and Lucy will handle that question mark dot operator, which basically you can kind of make it, if it doesn't work, you can basically combine the is null and does this key exist and does this key exist as you go down the depth of the thing into really just one line of code by putting the question mark in there. Now, this is the newbie, not newbie, I don't mean that, but I mean, I don't have the sophisticated language on this, but I saw this and like JavaScript does that. I didn't realize Cold Fusion did too.
I know in JavaScript they call it the optional chaining modifier. I'm not sure what the Cold Fusion name for it is called.
I think actually Ben in here calls it the safe navigation operator. The question mark and the dot. There you go. I just found that. That's right. because it basically what it says, it analyzes the left hand side and the right hand side, and if either basically comes in as null, it returns an undefined, and we can pass around. This actually gets to the crux of it, because his point for that was actually incidental, but he goes into the difference between referencing a null variable and passing around a null variable.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that safe navigator operator turns everything into passing around a null variable, which is safe, as opposed to referencing a null variable, which is what's going to throw an error in Cold Fusion.
Right. So if you are using these decision functions, right, you're saying is simple value, and you pass it, variable name and that variable is null, you'll get an error, a runtime error, because you tried to access a null value. But if you pass it the return value of a function which returns null, or use this safe navigation operator, then you don't access it there, and so it's safe, and then you go in. It's one of those, why is null still weird in Cold Fusion questions? Which
Agreed.
Time to plug BoxLing. Null is a thing. Done.
Null is the thing. Done. If you use any of Eric's modules, for the most part, null is the thing. Done. We're good. Which is good, like in QB or Quick. All right, null is null.
I mean, that's for me. I get that the person who made null called it his $1 million mistake and all that. But as long as databases have a null column, I want null in my system.
Well, it just to match and be compatible and have it exactly. Otherwise, you find yourself looking for null or for undefined or for blank space, and it all kind of is the same thing as you go through stuff.
You probably, most people would be like, it's fine, just check for empty string. And I would say you have then never, unfortunately, dealt with a database that has values of empty strings in the columns. And I know that sounds terrible, but it's as annoying as it sounds to have both null and empty string values.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense. I mean, sometimes 0 means false, and sometimes 0 is a value of 0, and you have to be able to figure out which, and determining that can be difficult. Anyway, random thoughts, but I thought that was a really cool blog post. David Bellinger's preach, Eric, you do it. All right. Very cool.
A weird side note. So Quick, wanting to know if something's null, I put in a feature that has you can define a column's null value, which means if it comes back as this value, that means it's null in the database, right? And it was this weird, so you could have empty strings but still set something to null. It's such a weird workaround, and I'm excited for full null support, and specifically BoxLing to just not have to worry about that ever.
That's awesome. Cool.
So this next one from Ben, this is bitten me in the butt. Adobe Cold Fusion parses JSON into non-ordered structs. So what does that mean? It means if you serialize JSON and then deserialize what you got back, Adobe Cold Fusion is not guaranteed to be in the same order. Lucy does it in an ordered struct, which means the order that it deserializes is the order that you'll get. JavaScript does that. It's the order that you'll get. Technically, as Ben points out, that is not part of the JSON spec. It does not guarantee that. But he used a word it's like Hiram's law, was it? Did you see that?
Let me
Hiram's law, which is,
I thought that was kind of cool.
When a sufficient number of users of an API, with a sufficient number of users of an API, it does not matter what you promise in the contract. All observable behaviors of your system will be depended on by somebody. Which there's also, I feel like, an XKCD comic associated with that. But yeah,
I could see that.
Everything else seems to maintain order. The fact that Adobe doesn't is very annoying. And I said I've been bitten by it writing tests. This serializes. I'm doing most of my tests in Lucy because I preferred Lucy. This is before BoxLing. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, I got to make sure to test Adobe, and they'd all fail. And they'd fail because the order's different, and I had to then take the struct that comes back and then sort the keys and then just all this extra work because it wasn't deterministic. So fix that, Adobe.
True. Well, I always thought, and this is actually just coming from a different perspective, I never understood why order structures were that important. I thought the whole point was that they weren't structured. But I guess I haven't run into a situation where the order of what struct was there needed to be important. But that also could be just lack of experience to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I do think a lot of it is aesthetic, right? You've
Mhm.
put time into making it look in a certain way.
True.
I mean, CFconfig is one where you can imagine if Adobe was the engine running command box, and every time you loaded and then saved your CFconfig, it changed all the order of your keys. You'd be pretty ticked
Ah,
at that.
that is true. And actually that happens sometimes when you're using the .env module or different env
Right.
not parsers, but writers, where your env file then gets rearranged. So yes, maybe I have run into a situation where the order was important. Come
So
to think of
as
it.
far as like code working, it usually
Uh-huh.
doesn't matter, but it can be annoying. It's the same with
That
Cold
is true.
Fusion and case
Mhm.
sensitivity, right?
Mhm.
Most of the time it doesn't matter. It can when you're serializing things, but you just want
Right.
it to look good. You don't want to have big old capitalized keys coming out
Yeah.
everywhere.
It's
So
true. And then when you start interfacing with different JavaScript libraries, which is case sensitive, then
yes,
you get into all that kind of stuff too. So yeah, no, that I've definitely run into a bunch. In fact, here we go. On July 15th, Ben had a blog about that. And that was not meant to be a segue. Those were two very true statements that happened to be part of the whole thing. Um, yeah, the whole thing basically in Cold Fusion, how structs being case insensitive. And but he was talking about he needed to somehow retrieve what was the original casing of the key that was in the structure. So he ended up writing a whole thing about basically called, struct get key, where it went through and actually got the original casing out of the structs and returned it. And he kind of demonstrates how he was able to make it basically make it case sensitive. So you would get the same values back no matter what he submitted, just like you would in any Cold Fusion structure. But he was able to get the actual casing out of it.
Hmm.
It's kind of neat. There's always like some kind of underlying thing, even if I don't use what Ben's talking about. I'm like, that's fascinating, and I know it's going to deepen my understanding of what we're doing. Anyway, this next one had to do with CF locks. Basically, Ben was going through and trying to lock different transactions, whether it be reading data, writing data, and everything else. And he was able to use the attribute collection, which for those of you that know, most functions in Cold Fusion, you can submit all the arguments individually, as it says in the specs, but then also submit them underneath an attribute collection as a structure. That way you
so
can actually just group everything. Is that correct?
the attribute collection specifically applies to tags, and it's argument collection that
Correct.
applies to functions. Yep.
Okay. That makes sense. Argument collection. Okay, thank you. The distinction between the two, with the same concept, attribute would be tag, and then the argument would be a function because of the nomenclature. Okay, got it. Okay, see, this is such an educational podcast. So what he's talking about basically in this is gives examples about how to lock data or be able to read data based on what attribute or argument collection is being submitted, which I thought was kind of cool. The next two I thought were fascinating. Not fascinating, but really kind of resonated because I teach a lot of people that are just starting out in code, and I use Cold Fusion where I teach, and even sometimes in more advanced stuff. The title of this blog post is "Code Isn't Magical; It's Just a Series of Commands." And what I think is fascinating, because I don't know how many times I've actually said in a in a workshop or in a class where I'm like, okay, don't ascribe magical powers to this. Like there is a logic and a reason why something happened. But sometimes when we actually are just starting out with a new framework or a language or a code base, it's easy to kind of say, wait a minute, there's magic in this. I don't understand why putting something in over here made something on the complete metaphorical other side of the application do something strange. Ben actually uses an analogy to quantum entanglement, which if you don't know what that is, basically it's a phenomenon in subatomic particles. I actually learned a little bit about the phrasing on this. I had the concept, but my brother talks about it, and I got basically how to articulate it here. You have these subatomic particles where if the properties change in one of these subatomic particles, if there is a corresponding one that it's connected to, doesn't matter where it is, it could be miles, whatever, light years away, it changes. No one has any idea why that actually happens, but it does. It's been quantified, documented. No one knows why it happens, but even if it's, and it's almost immediate, like even to the sense of it's almost faster than light. And so people like should be impossible. We're not quite sure. But Ben uses that analogy to say, let's not ascribe that kind of magical power to our code. If there's something that feels like that, is there something in the framework that you're not quite getting? Is it something having to do with like maybe there's an event-driven architecture that you don't know about? There is, in cold box, interceptors was a big thing for me on this. Interceptors, I couldn't quite get it, like when they were firing, why they were firing. Once you got it, you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But for a while, it was magic. Wirebox, I think, was kind of the same thing. Like for me, I don't get it. It was magic, and all of a sudden, this code shows up. And once I got that, oh, now I see the cause and effect and the linear command systems that make this work. But I thought it was neat, just the idea of, obviously code isn't magic. If you just take a breath, there is a logical component to how all this works. Now that tied in directly to his next one that I thought was interesting, which had to do with the JavaScript application size shouldn't affect performance. And that was from August 1st. And he's talking about how he'll be, because people love to talk about different JavaScript libraries. I mean, obviously there's everything from Angular, React, Next, Vue, whatever. I mean, all the different ones that are out there. And in discussing them, obviously, it can be a good academic exercise, but it can also sort of turn into religious debate sometimes where it's like, this one's the best one, and here's why, about whatever. But what he talks about, though, is that the size of the application, because there's a conversation point that comes out that says sometimes a framework can only go up to a certain size. And after that, it can't handle the size of the application. Therefore, you should change framework to this new and shiny one that can make it bigger. And his point on this is that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me, which I agree with them. If it's a well-made app, it shouldn't matter how big it is. He says, but now he makes a distinction between compiling and kind of like pre-rendering processes, which may take longer if your app is larger. But the actual runtime user experience should not change if it's well done. The only thing that should really make a difference on that is how much data you're bringing back. And if your data is badly put together and you have too many calls to the database and your database is slow or your backend is slow, doesn't matter what JavaScript library you're using, that's going to be a problem. And I thought that was thought it was really good. I tend to use a React a lot, and that is not necessarily, at least at the moment, the JavaScript of choice. And I find sometimes feeling a little defensive where I'm like, I just haven't learned the new ones yet. But I like React, and I think it works, and I think it works for me, and I understand it, and it works. And I think it's just that it works about 7 times because I'm feeling defensive all of a sudden, and I just brought it up myself.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Ben mentions it in here, but I don't know. Maybe I'm being the devil's advocate here, but he mentions that the size will affect the initial load time of the application. And I do feel like he missed one part. He said it may increase if the client has to pull down larger files when initially loading the page. And that's true. The second part is any file that you are loading on the page has to be parsed, right? JavaScript is an interpreted languages. It has to be parsed. And that comes down a lot probably to how you can architect it, right?
the code splitting, yeah.
In the day, the days before code splitting,
Right.
JavaScript single page applications, you downloaded everything. It parsed the entire application and then it went, right? And so I do think there is something to be said to that. Now, is it worth switching frameworks? I mean, there's probably a lot more you can do to improve the performance of your application than switching frameworks. But yeah, so I think his points stand, but I did want to pull out that one. Like that is, at least in JavaScript, a very real cost of having big files.
True.
So.
Well, that's true. But then, like you said, you could also argue that that's an architecture issue, and if you did it better, then maybe a little bit a little smoother.
And maybe you are using a framework that does not deal with that well, right? And you feel like you would be served by a better framework. Again, framework here doesn't even have to mean like I'm using React or Vue. It could be how you're architecting, right? You can use jQuery and still code split. It's just you have to set it up yourself and know what you're downloading on each page and how to share the files. So, yeah, it was an interesting article.
Yep. Yeah, I liked it.
There was one that we
And,
skipped above that I wanted to talk about for Ben. He talked
oh,
about
the
the
OWASP,
OWASP one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So we all need to know something about security, right? And I feel like
Mhm.
every time I read anything on OWASP, I find out I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So the OWASP
It's like,
recommends.
it is the flossing of coding.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing it wrong.
Ben was like, okay, so I'm putting a URL in an href of an anchor tag. What should I use? A URL encode or attribute encode, HTML attribute encode? And the answer is both. So you're building your URL. Any of the URL parameters should be URL encoded, and then the attribute itself should be attribute encoded. It did make me think, just briefly, like I wonder if BoxLing, knowing that it parses, has a parser for tags, if we can be like, the A tag is actually a BoxLing tag that will automatically encode the href attribute and just pass everything else. Because I just want something to do this automatically for me. If I'm always supposed to attribute encode the href, why don't the browsers do it? Like, I don't know. There's probably a reason, but I just forget.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
So the takeaway from this is you're probably doing it wrong, and check out what you should be doing now.
Yes.
I do know the ColdBox HTML helper, which isn't used a ton. I think mostly because JavaScript frameworks kind of take over there. But that was part of the idea, is you could say, I want an anchor tag, and it would automatically do some of these things for you. That's why you would use the anchor function instead of a normal anchor tag, right? Because a lot of the times you're like, what benefit am I getting? And these are the benefits we're trying to add. I believe React does something similar when you're using, what looks like an anchor tag and it turns into a function. It's actually doing some of these things for you. So
possible.
anyways,
Gotta be honest, I'm not sure
anything to save me from myself, please.
Yes, that is true. I did think it was funny. There's a couple paragraphs in that blog post about he tried to get ChatGPT to explain it to him. And all I kept saying is that the browser might interpret, %22 as an early termination of a quoted value, but no modern browser would actually do such a thing. And that turned into such a circular conversation with ChatGPT, he just kind of gave up. So I was like, oh, that makes sense. I've had that circular conversation.
We made it.
We did. Ben's site should definitely be a stopping point much more often than it actually is. I always end up at Ben's site. I should just start there. You know what I mean? Just like, let's just go there first.
I've been doing that more often, especially prepping for the podcast, because how do I put this without flaming everybody? I don't enjoy being on X, and so I don't go there, and I am just finding myself, instead of like, CF didn't migrate anywhere, right? There's some people on Facebook, but nobody went to Threads, nobody went to Mastodon. We're just all kind of in the wind. So now I'm just pulling up people's websites. It's almost nice. It's like RSS again. I need RSS again. That's what I need.
Yes. There's a lot less noise sometimes when you just kind of go and find what you need.
And a lot less angry people.
And a lot less angry people. That is true. That is true.
All right.
Oh, if you are feeling anger because you have recently lost a position or had a contract end, we have hope for you. Get over your anger first. Don't go on to X. No, I'm just kidding. We have CFML Jobs. There are several positions available at CFMLjobs.com. Right now,
I think they cleaned up some stuff, because I mean, it's been 2 months. I get that.
Yep.
But it was like 127 open positions, and now there are 15.
15.
So I feel like whoever runs this went through and said, "Oh, look, these 105 positions have been up for years. They're not real
exactly
jobs."
If they're not filled yet, this company shouldn't exist. Therefore, get rid of that.
So yes, there's only 15, but these are all ones that have been within this year, which is an improvement. So
although it is funny, about a week ago, I all of a sudden started getting a flood of emails from recruiters about Cold Fusion positions. And part of me at first was like, do you know something that I don't? But it just, I don't know, they come in waves, I suppose. But there was a bunch that I got all together, and I was like, uh-oh. So anyway, the jobs are out there.
Yeah, and a couple I've noted in the last couple months, there's a couple contract positions. Richmond, Virginia, Herndon, Virginia. I believe both of those you do need to be on site. And then there's a full-time position with Circo for a senior Cold Fusion developer in Pennsylvania. Additionally, I did see in the prep a link to a job on X. I know I just told you I don't enjoy it, but I was on there. From Mike Horn talking about reaching out for a job. I believe he's based in the UK. So if you're looking for a Cold Fusion position in the UK, we'll have that post also in the show notes.
I'm almost gonna I was put a thing on there. Don't read the comments. Just go to the post. But I'm like, no, that I don't want to reflect it on Mike. I was just kidding when I said that. So anyway, X can be a scary place, but Mike's page is awesome. Go do that.
So I'm very excited about this ForgeBox module because not this into the box, but the last into the box, we got a sneak peek of this, and I've been waiting for it, and it is here. This was published. Let's see. There's been 3 releases. So this was published on June 6th. I don't know if that was the first one. Let's see. May 16th of this year was the first one. This is the ColdBox Scheduled Task Manager by Giancarlo Gomez, one of our Patreon supporters as well. He presented this into the box 2023. It is a UI to see all of your different scheduled tasks, when they last fired, when they're next going to fire, their period, how long it took, how many runs. You can turn them off and on. You can delete them. It's amazing. And
Sweet.
all you have to do is box install scheduled task manager, and then go to the entry point / scheduled task manager, and you're good. And I'm just so excited for this.
That's awesome.
So
that is very
honestly, the picture is worth much more. So I think I have my local set up. Let's see how bad this is. Not very well. All right. Some OBS changing on the fly. Da, 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 da. There we go. Okay, good enough. Now here's the fun picture. You can see what module or executor it has. You can give them groups, the task name, started on, last run, next run, period, how long it took, how many runs it's done, and the status. All right there. All great. I'm so glad this exists. Thank you so much, Giancarlo.
That is very cool. Nice. I love when people solve problems that just kind of linger, and then like, oh wait, that's a great solution for it, and it works, and it's well designed and very visually stunning as well. Cool.
So the VS Code hint, tip, and trick of the week is because I had to run into this. I don't know what I did, Dan, but I was trying to do some BoxLing development, and the Java extensions just would not start. It would start up, and it would say, we're in lightweight mode, which means really you get syntax highlighting. That's it. And I'm used to now like being able to click run tests in the gutter and to like command click on something, and it takes me to the function that's doing it, and like auto import, all the fun stuff. And it just wasn't working, and I couldn't get it. I'd even like disable all the other extensions, just not working. So I did the nuclear option, and I trashed VS Code and my VS Code home directory, and I started from scratch.
Okay.
And it's painful because I realize all the time, like, why isn't this keyboard shortcut working? Oh yeah, because
I made it and now it's gone.
So I've been doing that. But one thing that's been nice has been trying to set up VS Code profiles. The idea here is you have different tasks you try to accomplish, and it could be I'm Java programming now, I'm Cold Fusion or BoxLing programming now, I'm in JavaScript. It could be I'm writing a novel in VS Code, and I want it to have certain extensions and certain settings. I'm writing docs, and I want the markdown stuff and the font to change and the text to be bigger. All those things you can handle through profiles. And lately, they've added a nice UI, which is why I wanted to bring this up. In the last release, there's an experimental UI you can enable where you can name it, you can choose which settings are applied to each, you can have extensions applied to certain profiles. I have one that I've been playing with for when I do like CFcast videos, so that I can get really big screen and very minimal stuff so you can just see the code. Just really neat. A way to organize all those. You can access it. Profiles have been around for a while. The new UI is as of this last month. So make sure you're up to date and you'll be able to access that and see if profiles help you out like they've been helping me out.
That is very cool. Yeah, there's so much VS Code that you just don't even know where to start half the time. But this looks very handy.
I'm still surprised that it's as fast as it is. I mean, I know there's
Yeah.
faster. Every time I go back to Sublime Text, I cry a little bit about how quick it comes up.
Right.
But
Then you try to do something that it doesn't do, and you're like, oh, that's why it's fast.
For me, I know it's such a stupid like killer app, if you will. It's the terminal. I don't want a different terminal application. I just want it at the bottom of my little screen. And for whatever reason, that's still not something that Sublime does. There's like extensions that try to, but they're just not good. And I'm like, I don't know, Sublime Text 5, put a terminal in and I might be back.
There you go.
So
that works.
I know you're a JetBrains guy. So when we talk about how long something takes to start up, you're just like, don't talk to me.
Actually, it's funny. Up until I would say December, and I still use it. There's some Git tools that JetBrains that JetBrains has that are phenomenal. Be able to compare between branches and all kinds of stuff. But I've been trying to go VS Code because I wanted to be with the cool kids, and it's good. I mean, I like it. There's a couple, like I said, there's a couple things I don't like as much, but for the most part, and you know, it didn't cost me the $180 that I had to pay for the license and stuff. Although I'm also realizing that sometimes if you have a good feature, it might be worth the money and stuff. But it's going well. I like it.
I do actually. Have the JetBrains IntelliJ community installed. Again, sometimes for BoxLing development, I'll tell you, JetBrains' refactor tools are just above the rest.
Yeah.
Like I can go in and I say, you know, this is the thing I want to rename, and not only is it's like a find and replace in the file, but it's smart and knows what variable. It's looking in other files where I passed it in differently. It's just it's great. If you ever wanted to rename a method name and you're like, I don't know where I use this, like that's one tool. Now I know that's possible with VS Code and like the language servers, and seeing that it is something that could come to BoxLing, and so I got my fingers crossed for that one day.
Awesome. Yeah, for me, the big jump going from IntelliJ to a VS Code was that it didn't like arrow. So IntelliJ didn't think that Cold Fusion could do arrow functions. So whenever I wrote an arrow function or came across one in the code, it would flag it as an error. So I'd have a huge line, huge, just long lines of code that would come back as an error, and I'm like, no, it's not. And I just got on a project where they were everywhere, and I was like, okay, I need to make the jump to arrow functions, and I obviously can't do it with what I'm using now. So
there you go.
But it works.
There's only one place to get the BoxLing extension right now, and that is VS Code.
That is VS Code. That is true. True. All right. And part of the reason why that is possible is because of our Patreon supporters. These individuals are personally supporting our open source initiatives to ensure that great toolings like CommandBox, ForgeBox, ColdBox, ContentBox, TestBox, and all the other boxes that are out there, including BoxLing, and make sure that they keep getting the continuous development that they need. Their contributions fund the cloud infrastructure that our community relies on, like ForgeBox, and the package management for our package management within CommandBox. My tooth just started hurting. Sorry. You can support us at patreon.com/ortasolutions. We have annual memberships where you pay for the year and save 10%, which is great for everyone. Bronze packages and up. You now can get a ForgeBox Pro and a CFCast subscription as a perk for your Patreon subscription. All Patreon supporters have a profile badge in the community website. All Patreon supporters have their own private forum accessed on the community website. Now, just to clarify, we obviously answer questions from everybody. This is not a matter of access. It's a matter of timing of access. Sometimes we can get back to people a little quicker if we see it. I'm in a certain place, but we are, members of Ortus are in all the different languages and stuff, or all the different channels, I should say. But that's one that's for Patreon that maybe get your answer a little bit quicker. And all Patreon supporters have their own private channel access Box Team Slack. So you want a little faster access to the Ortus team, this is a good way to do it.
That's right.
Check it out at Ortus, a community.ortus solutions. Well, the community is at community.ortussolutions.com.
And we'd
All
love
right.
to read some names out of our top stupendous Patreons. I actually don't know if we've used the word stupendous before, but I like it so much that I wanted to put it in here.
It is a
And
good word. I
so,
like it.
special thanks to John Wilson at Synaptrix, Tomorrow's Guides, Jordan Clark, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, David Bellinger, Dan Card, James Moberg and Jeffrey McGee at Sunstar Media, Dean Monder, Kevin Wright, Doug Kane, Nolan Irk, and Abdul Raheen. And thank you all to the rest of the Patreons as well. Up to 57 now. You can see an up-to-date list at ordersolutions.com/about-us/sponsors. We made it, and it's still only an hour. I've gone an hour with much less content.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Oh, nice.
Good to be
I'm
back
sorry.
with
The
you
thank
all.
you, David, was for a comment in the thing. I was not calling Eric David. That was from a comment in the chat. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you all for joining us. It's good to be back. Now that summer is coming to a close, or at least I say it's coming to a close because school is coming back, which means my days become a lot less scheduled with children.
Yes.
So
We still have another month before school starts here in the Northeast, but I know a lot of places start in the next week or so. Actually, it's crazy.
we got a week and a half.
Oh,
Not that I'm counting the days.
Not that you're exactly. I love my children, but when are they leaving the house? No, I'm just kidding.
I do love my children, and I'm excited for them to come back every day from school.
Exactly. I can't miss them if they don't go away.
So
Just kidding.
we hope to see you in a couple weeks, and we can get back on that schedule. Also look forward to and listen for the next BoxLing Town Hall to get a more in-depth dive into the features that we just barely scratched the surface of from all these great betas. And we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernize.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.